Vladimir Putin is still one of the most recognizable leaders in the world. But is he as powerful as former US President Donald Trump once was? Or has Russia lost its edge? There was a time when Russia, once part of the mighty Soviet Union, could challenge the United States on almost every global issue. But today, it finds itself more isolated than ever, especially from Western countries. Trade ties have weakened, diplomatic relationships have faded, and the ongoing war with neighboring Ukraine has made things worse. Now, Ukraine was once not just a neighbor but a part of Russia, or more accurately, part of the Soviet Union, the USSR. And Ukraine wasn't alone. There were 15 countries that once made up this massive socialist superpower. So what happened? How did such a powerful union collapse? And why? Let's rewind to 25th December, 1991. It was a cold, silent night in Moscow. But something symbolic was happening at the Kremlin. The red Soviet flag was slowly being lowered. In its place, a new flag, the Russian tricolor, was raised. That same evening, on national television, Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev addressed the nation and announced his resignation. With that one moment, a 70-year-old superpower came to an end. Just like that, the USSR, once the rival of the USA, victor of the space race, and torchbearer of socialism, ceased to exist. But can a nation really collapse in a single night? Of course not. That flag-lowering ceremony was just the final act. The cracks had started forming long ago. The rot began from within. This is the story of how one of the world's most powerful nations slowly fell apart. The beginning, Revolution and Dreams, 1917 to 1924. The story begins in 1917, in the middle of World War I, when a massive revolution swept across Russia. It's known as the Bolshevik Revolution, led by Vladimir Lenin. At the time, Russia was ruled by Tsar Nicholas II, and poverty was widespread. To make matters worse, Russia had just lost a war against Japan, a small nation, and morale was low. While the common people starved, the royal family and elites lived in luxury. That's when Lenin promised a new kind of government, communism, where power would lie with the workers and peasants, not the rich. In 1918, the foundation of Soviet Russia was laid. And by 1922, Lenin brought together Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Georgia, and Armenia to form the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR. Lenin's dream was simple yet powerful. A country where everyone would get education, healthcare, and employment. And in the early years, things did start to improve. But in 1924, Lenin died unexpectedly, and everything changed. The rise of Stalin, power at a cost, 1924 to 1953. After Lenin's death, Joseph Stalin took over. Though he had worked with Lenin, Stalin had very different ideas. He wasn't as focused on ideology as he was on power. Soon, Stalin became a dictator. He launched 5-year plans, took over farms and factories, and forced people to move to cities to work in industries. Anyone who opposed him was branded a traitor, jailed, executed, or made to disappear. He allowed only one political party, the Communist Party, and crushed any form of dissent. If you think Hitler and Mussolini were brutal, Stalin was no less. He began something called the Great Purge, where over 2 million people were either killed or sent to labor camps. It didn't matter if you were a writer, scientist, or artist. Disagreeing with Stalin meant the end of your freedom, or life. Outwardly, the USSR seemed like a rising superpower, but inside, people were living in fear and misery. World War II and becoming a superpower, 1939 to 1945. In 1939, Hitler's Germany attacked the USSR. But against all odds, the Soviets fought back and even captured Berlin. This victory marked the USSR as a global superpower. Now, the world had two poles, the capitalist USA and the communist USSR. The ideological clash led to the Cold War, not a direct war, but a battle of influence, technology, weapons, and spies. During this time, the USSR sent the first human into space, Yuri Gagarin, and developed powerful missiles that could reach across continents. On the outside, the USSR looked mighty. But the cost was enormous. The economy started to decline. People had no freedom of speech, no real elections, and lived under constant surveillance. After Stalin, change, but not enough, 1953 to 1985. Stalin died in 1953, bringing some hope. Nikita Khrushchev came to power and criticized Stalin's brutal policies. But he couldn't fix the economy or improve daily life for citizens. During the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, Khrushchev placed nuclear weapons in Cuba, just miles from the US. This brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. Though a deal was reached, it cost Khrushchev his position. Next came Leonid Brezhnev, 1964 to 1982. His rule was called a time of stability, but in reality, nothing improved. Corruption spread, industries stagnated, and people lost faith. The USSR was slowly rotting from the inside. Then came the final blow. In 1979, the USSR invaded Afghanistan. It turned into their version of the Vietnam War, a long, painful conflict that drained resources and morale. By the early 1980s, the USSR looked powerful but was hollow inside, like a ship slowly sinking. Gorbachev's reforms and the beginning of the end, 1985 to 1991. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev became the leader. Unlike his predecessors, he understood that the country needed change, and fast. He introduced two key reforms. 1. Glasnost, openness. People could now speak freely, criticize the government, and print the truth in newspapers. 2. Perestroika, restructuring. This aimed to give some freedom to the economy by allowing private businesses. But instead of fixing things, these reforms exposed how broken everything already was. For the first time, people learned about Stalin's crimes, the lies about the Afghanistan war, and the propaganda they had grown up believing. Trust in the government collapsed. Economically, things got worse. Prices soared, shops ran out of food, and people waited in long lines just to buy milk or bread. People started saying, "Earlier we had no freedom, but at least we weren't hungry." The collapse, one country becomes 15, 1986 to 1991. With glasnost, suppressed national identities started rising. The USSR wasn't just Russia. It was made up of many different cultures, languages, and religions. Now, people wanted their own countries back. It started in Kazakhstan, 1986, with protests. Then came the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, who formed a 600-kilometer-long human chain in 1989 demanding independence. In the same year, the Berlin Wall fell, and countries across Eastern Europe started abandoning communism. Inside the USSR, living conditions got worse, the economy crumbled, and frustration grew. In 1990, Lithuania declared independence. Other republics followed. In August 1991, hardliners tried to overthrow Gorbachev by placing him under house arrest. But Boris Yeltsin, the leader of Russia, stood against the coup. Millions supported him. The coup failed, but the message was clear. The USSR was no longer stable. On 25 December 1991, Gorbachev resigned. The Soviet Union officially ceased to exist. A day before, Russia had already claimed the USSR's seat at the United Nations. Aftermath: a new Russia, a new world. The 15 former Soviet republics became independent nations: Ukraine, Belarus, Latvia, Lithuania, Kazakhstan, and more. The United States remained the only superpower, and the Cold War was officially over. Russia, while still the largest country in the world, no longer had the influence it once did. Final thoughts. The Soviet Union didn't collapse in a single day. It fell over decades, due to authoritarian rule, economic failure, lack of freedom, and the refusal of leaders to let go of power. It started as a dream of equality and socialism but ended in collapse and confusion. It's a story of how power without reform and control without compassion can destroy even the mightiest of empires. So, if you found this story powerful or informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Aarthav Curiosity channel for more such stories from the past that still shape our present. Thank you so much for watching.